Welcome to the third annual Distinguished Alumni Award Assembly for the Overlake School. My name is Christian Fulghum, and I graduated from Overlake in 1977, and I have been the Director of Alumni Engagement at Overlake since 2014. 5 years ago, I approached Matt Horvat about creating a Distinguished Alumni Award for Overlake that would embody our mission and values and also be true to our unique culture. To that end, I interviewed students, alumni, faculty, and staff, and eventually we created a committee on the alumni board to identify candidates. This year's honoree is Cora Nally from the class of 1989. She has spent her life after Overlake in public health, in service to others around the world. As you will hear, she and her husband Tom have traveled and lived and worked in a wide variety of countries and cultures and managed to raise a family in the process. I was struck by Cora's modesty and her quiet authority. Wherever she has worked, she has encountered challenges, and Cora will share how she found her Overlake experience to be invaluable in breaking down seemingly insurmountable large problems into small, manageable pieces and then finding a way to move forward. I hope that you find Cora's words as inspiring as I do. I want to thank the Alumni Board for their work in identifying prospective nominees, the Board of Trustees for the unanimous support, and Matt for listening to my bare bones of an idea and allowing me to bring it to fruition. Finally, I want to thank the faculty and staff, both those present today and those from earlier years, for their amazing work that they do every day, the enduring impacts which result, and the many lives which are affected. And now, Cora Nally.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming today. I'd like to start by thanking the Alumni Board and the Board of Directors for this great honor. I also want to recognize the amazing staff and teachers at the Overlake School, both now and from when I attended in the 80s. Hi Army! I could not be in a position to accept this award without the support of my husband of 27 years, Tom Nally, and my 2 children, as well as friends and family who have supported me and mentored me along the way. My career as an international public health consultant has allowed me to witness firsthand the impact of evidence-based knowledge on the health of a community. I have found when communities are given accurate information, adequate tools to respond to the information, and access to health services they trust, healthy outcomes are a foregone conclusion. I have been fortunate to work in Eastern Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Americas, responding to disasters, combating epidemics, and strengthening health systems. When I started at Overlake in 1983, there were about 250 students in grades 7 to 12. The Student Center was still inside the old barn, and there was a smoking section for students and teachers in the field where the current campus center stands. Times have certainly changed. Overlake always felt safe to me. It felt like a place where I could ask questions, I could make mistakes, and where I was respected for being myself. I'm sure it's still this way. Its stated mission when I was a student was to create an environment that inspires intellectual curiosity, nurtures individual growth, stimulates awareness and respect for others, and motivates self-discipline and acceptance of others. We have all been experiencing a collective trauma since March of 2020, the pandemic. How that impacts all of us, including the bright young minds here, remains to be seen. However, those original principles for Overlake remain in the midst of this collective, worldwide experience. The environment of awareness and respect for others has driven much of my career since graduating from Overlake in 1989, a time of big hair and big dresses. Altruism was important to my family growing up as well. Both my parents volunteered their time and efforts to better our communities. My father continues this in his retirement, volunteering with Habitat for Humanity and other NGOs. This ethos has stayed with me, and I have worked to impart it in my children. I have devoted my career to service. I remember having several great teachers at Overlake. Emma Allendorf is one that comes to mind most often. Emma brought a passion to reading and inspired a lifelong interest in books from many genres. This ability to get lost in the stories has provided solace for me throughout my life and continually offers ways to expand my own human experience through the words and observations of the authors. I also distinctly remember my government class with Howard Levin. We were required to subscribe to the Christian Science Monitor. It was my first exposure to the global experiences of people and governments. It inspired a strong sense of justice in me and was the root of the overwhelming feeling that luck plays a large part in the opportunities that I have had. I was lucky to be born into a country with access to education and healthcare. I was lucky to have a passport that allows for easy travel. At least it did pre-pandemic. Hopefully it will again someday. And I was lucky to live somewhere with a free and vocal press. I recognize there are barriers in the United States, and there are huge inequalities and systemic disparity that must be addressed. But I still believe I am lucky. I also believe this luck is not a result of any merit. It is not earned, it just is. And since I am so lucky, I have an obligation to tear down barriers for others, to address systemic disparities as I can, and to spread my luck around. I attended Washington State University, earning a bachelor's degree in psychology. When I graduated from Wazoo in 1993, I joined the Peace Corps. My history and geography classes with Don Christensen had sparked my curiosity in other countries and cultures. So in August of 1993, I hopped on a plane and left the country for the first time, not counting trips to our very close neighbor of Canada to the north. I landed in Cotonou, Benin, a small country in West Africa. The national language in Benin is French. So for the first time in my life, I was extremely grateful that Overlake required 6 years of language classes for graduation. Merci beaucoup, Madame Jean Capsi, my extremely patient Overlake French teacher. I really was a terrible French student, and she was very patient with me. I was dropped off alone in a small village with no electricity or running water, and this was in the dark ages before email and cell phones, so I really was isolated. I was a community development volunteer, which encompassed everything from animal husbandry, I learned how to castrate a goat, to good hand hygiene. What was needed in the village I lived in was another pair of hands at the health center, so I jumped in to help with baby weighings and nutrition classes for new parents. It was my first exposure to public health, and I was hooked. Public health is much more in the news now with the pandemic, but for those looking for a more concrete understanding, it's essentially a health professional who focuses on the health and well-being of entire populations. It can include specific careers in epidemiology, hygiene, safe water, vaccination campaigns, and emergency response work. Benin is a beautiful country right on the coast of West Africa, nestled between Nigeria and Togo. I was one of 86 Peace Corps volunteers in the country, and we were all working in agroforestry, teaching math and science in high school, eradicating guinea worm, or working in public health, like me. I was fortunate to meet my husband in Benin as well. He was also a Peace Corps volunteer and working in agroforestry. Visiting new places is always fun, but we both had learned so much about ourselves and the world living in Benin and traveling by land around West Africa that we wanted to have more of those opportunities. We also wanted our future children to share in that experience with us. I spent my 20s after returning from Peace Corps traveling the world with my husband, and I highly recommend it. We lived in Japan for 2 years, where I taught English in high school to students on Shikoku Island. I loved living in Japan. It's such a fascinating country. While we were there, we saved up enough money to travel back to the US, mostly by land, over 18 months. During that time, we visited 21 countries in East Asia, Eastern Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. This time together and the adventures we had on the road had a huge impact on how we saw our future as a family. We were determined to find a way to live and work in different countries. We settled back in Seattle in December of 2000, and our children were both born in 2002 and 2004. During this time, I became an accredited childbirth educator and doula and worked at Swedish Hospital on Capitol Hill, taking another step in my public health career. I really enjoyed working with new families and was able to continue honing my public health best practices, offering evidence-based information to new families and finding ways to remove barriers to healthcare for families. When my daughter was 5 and my son was 2, we moved as a family to Tbilisi, Georgia, where my husband worked as the Director of Operations for the Peace Corps program there. We lived in Tbilisi and my children attended international school. We also traveled back to Southeast Asia to explore, this time with our kiddos. While in Georgia, I began my own career as an international public health consultant. I earned a master's in public health and was able to pick up short-term contracts. One opportunity had me developing a childbirth and new parent education curriculum that was implemented countrywide in the public hospitals in Georgia. After 2.5 years in Georgia, we moved to Freetown, Sierra Leone in West Africa, where my husband was charged with reopening the Peace Corps program that had closed there in 1994 due to the guerrilla war that had bled into the country from Liberia. At the time, Sierra Leone was only famous for horrible fighting and blood diamonds. Our families and close friends were frankly horrified and scared that we were going to take our children, then 5 and 7, to live in a country with such a recently bloody history. But we had lived in West Africa before and felt sure that it would be a positive experience for all of us. For the most part, we were right about moving our children to Sierra Leone. Our family thrived there with great friends and beautiful beaches. We lived in Sierra Leone for 3.5 years. We had an apartment in Freetown and my children attended the international school. We left in 2013 when my husband transferred his career from Peace Corps to the State Department. While I was in Sierra Leone, I worked with several different international and local NGOs. This work included starting a maternal and child health community health worker program in the Kono district of Sierra Leone, where the diamonds are mined, creating a national health campaign to reduce disabilities in children under the age of 5, and conducting research into maternal mortality. As a result of this experience, when Ebola hit West Africa, I was committed to finding a way to return to Sierra Leone to help the communities that I care so much about. Partners in Health, an international NGO focused on restoring social justice by bringing quality healthcare to the most vulnerable around the world, was working with the Sierra Leonean government at the time to run an Ebola treatment facility in Port Loko, one of the hardest hit regions in the country. Partners in Health had partnered with a Sierra Leonean nonprofit, the Well Body Alliance. While I lived in Ceylon previously with my family, I had worked with the Well Body Alliance and managed their maternal and child health community health worker program. So Partners in Health reached out and asked if I would be interested in working with them on another community health worker program, this time focused on Ebola. I jumped at the opportunity. Specifically, I was hired to work with 35 community health workers that I had worked with previously in Kono. I was being asked to pivot their work from maternal and child health to Ebola. I was looking forward to seeing my colleagues again and was ready to get to work in northern Sierra Leone. In early January, I landed in Sierra Leone after a 36-hour journey from the United States. I was expecting to sleep in the capital of Freetown and head up country the next day. For the most part, it's not very safe to drive to Kono in the dark as the road is very bad and there are no lights. Instead, I was directed to a van full of doctors and nurses and was told I was going to Port Loko. I had never been to Port Loko before and knew it was the wrong direction for the job that I had been hired for. Once I got in the van, the driver handed me an envelope with my name on it. I opened it up and found a 2-page document. I read that I was being retasked and was now to go to Port Loko and hire and train 1,200 community health workers as quickly as possible. I was given a 2-page rough program outline, 2 staff members, and a local cell phone. And that was it. No driver, no budget, no resources. Those 2 pieces of paper was all I had to start with. I was completely overwhelmed. This was hardly the role I had been hired for. 1,200 was a lot more than 35. Luckily, I slept that night after the very long flight. I woke up in the morning though, and the reality of my situation hit me again. I wondered if I should stay. I had no previous experience with the program that size. I had not worked with Partners in Health before either, so I didn't know how to navigate the organization's systems. How was I going to do this? Could I do this? The scope of what was being asked of me was enormous. It wasn't like I could advertise these jobs online. Every single person would have to be found in person, trained in person, and supervised directly while they worked. I seriously doubted that I could do what they were asking. I took a deep breath and I chose to view the project in front of me like any other project I had tackled before. Our senior year at Overlake, we had to write a thesis paper. This paper could be on any topic that interested you, and it was supposed to reflect all of the skills that you had learned as an Overlake student. I chose to write about how wars changed fashion and how this evolution of women's clothing reflected the evolution of women's roles in the workplace in the United States. I enjoyed researching at the Seattle Public Library, reading old women's fashion magazines, and finding other information I needed. I decided to take a similar approach to this project, break it down into sections, and start moving forward. I started by performing an assessment of existing programs related to the Ebola epidemic in Port Loko. I also started networking with other NGOs and the Sierra Leonean government. I was visiting the villages where we hoped to work, and I learned that each village had a committee that advised the chiefs on governing related issues. So I determined that these committees would nominate candidates for the community health worker program. I provided them with rough criteria and told them that of course the volunteers would be paid. I also learned that one of my housemates was actually the curriculum development coordinator for Partners in Health. So I had her start creating a curriculum for the community health worker program. During a conversation with the coordinator for our vehicles and drivers, he informed me his sister wanted to be a nurse someday. So I hired her as a community health worker, and from then on had access to a car and driver whenever I needed one. And on I went, each day completing small tasks and allowing the larger picture to unfold. Within 5 weeks, I had hired and trained 680 community health workers and 11 office staff, and we were ready to start working. I ran this program for 4 months in total. During that time, we shared more than 250,000 Ebola-related health messages with people. Ebola is an incredibly deadly disease. This particular strain had a fatality rate of 68%. Ebola is transmitted through bodily fluids and can be absorbed through your skin. So everyone was cautioned to not touch anything or anyone when they were working. In some ways, it was easier not to contract Ebola than it is to avoid contracting COVID-19. The community health workers identified 450 people with Ebola symptoms who were referred for testing, and we supported 95 families in quarantine. This meant ensuring that they had food and water and their other basic needs were met. The community health workers also facilitated communication between the Ebola treatment facilities and the patients' families and communities. Before our program, when someone was sick, an ambulance would come to the house and take them away, but the family wouldn't know where they were going or how they were doing. This was a huge barrier to people calling for an ambulance, and we removed that barrier. By doing so, we increased trust in the Ebola response, and fewer sick people stayed home, so fewer people were infected. In the end, I was very glad I had stayed, and the work proved extremely rewarding to me. I was very overwhelmed at several points in the response, but I continued to break enormous and impossible tasks into small and doable tasks, moving slowly forward day by day. I have since continued to work with emergency response programs, most recently for AmeriCares on the Hurricane Dorian response in the Bahamas. I am now working for Project Hope on the recovery efforts for the Bahamas as well, helping to rebuild the health system in Abaco, which is one of the islands destroyed by Hurricane Dorian in 2019. My family also continues to live and travel abroad. We moved from Sierra Leone to Washington, D.C. Then my husband received his first State Department assignment in Moscow, Russia. After Moscow, we lived in Kenya for 2 years. My daughter graduated from high school in Nairobi and is now in her second year at the University of Glasgow in the UK, studying computer programming and math. My son is a junior at an international school in the Bahamas, and my husband works there for the State Department. My husband and I were able to turn our dream into raising our children abroad a reality, and I wouldn't change a thing. I have also been provided with endless opportunities to use my privilege, my luck of birth, to be useful in this small and beautiful world that we all share. I disagree with people who say that high school is the best time in your life. Instead, I look upon my time at Overlake as providing me the foundational skills and insights that helped formulate who I am now. Overlake opened my eyes, helped me develop empathy, and encouraged me to be curious and to seek answers. Most importantly, though, it taught me that no problem is too big and that I can do anything I set my mind to, one step at a time. Thank you again for this honor. It was a privilege speaking with all of you today. Be kind and be useful to yourself and to others. Please take care. Goodbye.
Thank you all for attending. I'd like to especially thank David Chudzik for his work on the video. And if you have questions for Cora, you can write to me at alumni@overlake.org.